Well, hi everybody, and welcome to another build. Today we're going to be building a fairly budget range 1080p gaming PC with a mix of some used parts and some new parts, just because I wanted to get the best deal possible and get the biggest bang for your buck. And so this is going to be a pretty nice computer for what you are going to be paying for if you choose to buy this. And so I'm just going to kind of go from left to... Actually, I think I'll start on the right-hand side. I'll go from right to left to let you know what's going into this build, and we'll end on the case, which I have down there. Okay, so let's start over here with this little guy. This is going to be our power supply. It is a Rosewill 550-watt, 80-plus bronze, fully modular power supply. It's actually a lot more than this build really needs. It's a very, very nice power supply that should be plenty of clean power for this build. And obviously it's really nice that it's going to be modular, and you guys will see what I'm talking about when I take it out of the box. I'll show you guys what it looks like. But that is brand new, and it's going to serve our build really well. The next part that I have here is very important for the build. It is our processor, and then we're going to be using a Ryzen 3 1200. That's a quad-core 4-thread chip. I already have it out of the box here, and you guys can see that. We even have our little sticker for it. And so that's going to be at the heart of the system here, and it should be plenty for basic sort of 1080p gaming, especially if you're going to be doing stuff like Apex Legends or you know, Fortnite, things like that. This will be perfect for that. It'll even do what do you call Call of Duty Warzone fairly well. People kind of underestimate quad cores these days, but honestly, this is gonna get the job done fairly well. And we'll do some testing just so you guys can see the performance capabilities of this build. So that's going to be our processor there. Moving on to the storage options. So for our main boot drive, we're going to be using this sort of basic 120 gigabyte SSD. I think this is done by Light On, and it's going to just serve as our boot drive. I got a really good deal on this, and I've used these before, and they tend to do pretty well. So this will house our operating system and a couple of essential programs, and yeah, so it'll just basically serve as the boot drive. For our main extra data storage, where we'll keep games and things like that, I've got you guys this 500 gigabyte 2.5 inch Western Digital Blue spinning disk drive running at 4,500 RPM, and this should do just fine for just basic data storage. It'll hold games fairly well. I don't like to put a whole lot of money into storage because I tend to see, well, I've seen that people tend to change their storage out pretty frequently, and that's kind of a more customizable option. A lot of people have external drives that they use for their games and things like that, so I don't really bother dumping a bunch of money into a lot of extra storage. This is really just to get you guys started, whoever chooses to buy this thing. This will be plenty to get you started. This will hold, you know, 3 to 5 pretty large games, and it should be totally sufficient. Moving on to the motherboard. Here we have the MSI A320M A Pro, and you guys can notice here this is updated to take the latest generation of Ryzen processors if you ever want to upgrade down the road. This obviously is a first-gen Ryzen 3 processor, 14-nanometer process, but like I said, it's going to get the job done pretty well considering what it's intended for. And so this is a brand new part. It's just got this in the mail today from Newegg, so it should work just fine. As for memory, we're going to be using just some kind of, you know, some basic sort of green, you know, get the job done RAM. We're going to be putting 16 gigabytes in this, hopefully. And so I'm going to be using these 2 sticks of RAM here, and I think it's going to probably run at 2400 megahertz, but we'll see if we can get it to run up to like 26, you know, 66. We'll see what it's capable of, but that's going to be our set of RAM there. 16 gigabytes DDR4. Okay, so anyways, it's been a few days since I started this video and this build, and as you can see, I have a new graphics card sitting before you. had some issues with that RX480, and so I'm having to basically RMA that thing, and I didn't feel like waiting for it to return to finish this build, and so I'm just going to go ahead and put this card in there instead. And so this is the RX570 4GB model from XFX. It's going to be roughly equivalent in its capabilities. They're both 4GB cards. This is a 570. It's a generation later than the 480. You know, so it's going to be about the same. So I just figured, let's go for it. Let's put a new card in there so we don't have any more problems. And so, yep, that's what's going to be going into this build. I'll let you guys get a closer look at this card. That's what it'll look like inside the build there. And it's got a nice black metal backplate. And so it's basically, I mean, it's really equivalent. It's not going to be any worse. It's not really any better. It is better in the sense that it is brand new. I just got this in the mail today from Amazon. And yeah, I got all the plastic off of it and everything. And it should be good to go. So I'm going to put this in the build now. And we're going to fire it up, get some benchmarks on it, and get it ready to send away into someone else's home. So, yep, here we go. So those are the internal components going into this computer. I'll let you guys see what those look like in a second. I'm going to unbox some of this stuff. But I also wanted to show you what case this is going to go in, which we have right down here. This is our Montech Fighter 400. It's a tempered glass panel mid-tower case that's capable of holding full-size ATX motherboards, but we're putting in, obviously, the micro ATX board that you guys saw up there. And I think this has some LED accents, at least LED fans or something like that. We'll be able to see that together when I pull it out. But I think that it's a really good option for this build. It's going to look really nice, and it saved us some money as well. And you know, it's going to get the job done. And I think that this is going to work out really well, and you guys will be able to see just how well something like this can play games even today. So let's go ahead and start unboxing some of this stuff so you guys can see what that looks like. Okay, so we have our motherboard here out of the box, and you guys can get a nicer look at this. That's our A320M Pro identification there. You guys can see it's pretty basic looking motherboard. A320 is kind of at the budget end of things, but I tell you, it really does get the job done. I think this is going to work really well, just considering that we're just shooting for 1080p here, and we don't need anything real fancy. Just to give you guys a look at the I/O here on the side, we've got 4 USB 3s. I think these are USB 2.0 ports here. We have our Ethernet port, and you've got HDMI out and DVI out. If you have a a CPU with onboard graphics, that'll be more useful there. And you have some basic audio outs there as well. And of course the old school keyboard and mouse ports if you're still into that sort of thing. But yeah, that's what that's looking like. And I think it should work really nicely for what we are intending this build to be. Before we get the thing up and running here, I wanted to show you guys the cooler I'm going to be using. I forgot to mention it because I felt like it was a bit of a no-brainer, but I will indeed be using the standard Wraith Stealth cooler that comes with the Ryzen 1200, the Ryzen 3 1200 that is, and this should be more than enough cooling power for our CPU, especially on the A320 motherboard, because we're not going to be overclocking or anything like that. We're just going to be running this bad boy at stock. And we're just going to use the thermal paste that comes pre-applied, and there it is, ready to go. And so yeah, I just thought you guys would be interested to see what cooler we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and get this installed. Okay, so we have all the components assembled. I've got the graphics card plugged in, plugged into our HDMI out, going to this monitor here. I've got our RAM, I've got our CPU plugged in, I got our CPU power coming from our beautiful power supply there, I've got our 24-pin connector plugged in, and of course I have our PCI Express plugged in as well, and it looks like the card is plugged into the PCI Express slot correctly. So we're about ready to give this thing its first boot. And so before I do that, I always like to say a prayer, because as I've said in other videos, I'm a man of faith. I do believe that I must depend on the Lord for everything that I do, even as something as simple as this. You know, I can do a really nice job of selecting parts, putting parts together, making sure everything's plugged in correctly, but the Lord, our God, is the one who makes all things work and function as they should. And so I'm going to ask him to please bless the work of my hands, and that these parts will work well. So Heavenly Father, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to put this computer together. I do pray that that this all works well, that all these parts here are functioning properly and functioning optimally. And I do pray that you help me do the best job that I can to put this thing together, and that everything works out well for whoever eventually gets this PC in their home. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen. So yeah, I just like to come humbly before the Lord whenever I do something like this, just because it's always in his hands. And so I'm going to go ahead and power on the power supply. And let's see, this doesn't have any indicator on the motherboard just to say that it has power, but I am going to go ahead and give it power now. Let's see. Yeah, I think I've got everything functioning correctly. I have the monitor, looks like it's on and ready to go, so I'm going to go ahead and jump this thing. There it goes. Okay, so now it's the part we wait for this thing to post on that screen right there. And Ryzen tends to take a minute, so we'll let it do its thing. And that's the sign we're looking for. Let's take a look and see what this thing says. Looks like we've got 16 gigabytes of RAM being recognized. We've got our CPU being recognized as being changed. And it does see it as a Ryzen 3 1200 quad-core processor running in dual channel. Praise the Lord, man. It works. Even when you have brand new parts, there's always a chance that there's going to be something wrong with something you've selected, and in this case everything is working. We have video out to the screen, so our graphics card is functioning at least at that level to give us a video out. We've got processor being recognized right here, so it's functioning. And if you guys hear it right now, it's because all the fans are running full blast, because there aren't any options yet selected for those things. And our dual channel kit of memory is also being recognized. 16 gigabytes or 16,384 megabytes, just a different, you know, measurement scale. It's currently running at 2400 megahertz in dual channel, which is good enough, but we'll try to see if we can raise that up a little bit, maybe a little bit later. But as far as we need things to work, things are working. Things are functioning. And so I am just extremely pleased that this is all running well. So I'm going to go ahead and dabble around in the BIOS and see what's going on in there, and see if there's any cool changes and things I can make before I really get this thing built. You will see the case first. I'm going to show you guys the case that we're going to be using in more depth, and then you'll see our parts put into the case running beautifully with Windows 10 on it. Alright, so it's time to look at our case, and this is it right here. It's the Montech Fighter 400, as I said before. It's got its nice tempered glass panel on there still, and it's obviously got the fresh plastic because this is brand new. At the top, I'll show you that it features this nice place where you can put an AIO or just more fans. It's got a magnetic dust filter there. I mean, that's more for looks than anything else, because you're not going to want to be blowing air down into this thing. You're going to want to have air blowing up out like a chimney. And obviously, you're not going to want to trap dust on the inside, but it makes it look really nice. And I appreciate that for a case in this price point. It looks great. In the front here, we've got some mesh openings that allow for decent airflow that you guys can see there. You got front USB 3.0. You got a blocked off USB port right here, which I guess just doesn't go to anything. You got two USB 2.0s and then front audio connectors there. We've got what looks like our reset switch, and there's our power switch right there. Very, you know, sleek, simple, but still very nice looking. I'm going to go ahead and get that side panel off so you guys can see how things are looking on the inside, but you can already see there's a power supply shroud there, which is always nice to have to hide our cables and things like that. But yeah, it's looking really good. Let's get it opened up. Okay, so here we have all the panels off, except for the front panel, which I don't think I'm even needing to take off today. I'm just going to leave it on there. But it is always nicer to build with no panels on. But this way, you guys can also see what these things look like on the inside, just to give you an idea of what to expect. And so here we have in here another place for an AIO cooler that you guys could, you know, add in there if you wanted to, but also just, you know, standard fan. And, you know, it gives you some options. And there's plenty of space in there so you can mount the fans either way if you like, with the mesh side. A little bit of mesh paneling here allows, like I said, a lot of airflow. And then in the back here we have our case fan that is running as an exhaust fan, and this is going to be powered by a Molex. Kind of old school. Hopefully it's not too loud, but it should be blue LED. We'll see. With the times that we're living in, they may have sent me a different color, but who knows. So that's what it looks like, at least on the inside there. And then I'll turn it around so you can see the back. And there is a good amount of room for cable management back here. We got your kind of typical USB 3.0 connector. We got our front panel connectors. We got our USB connector there. This is our HD audio. Sorry if that's not looking real good. That's our HD audio. That's our USB 2.0. That's our USB 3.0. And this here looks like, what is this? Oh, it's also USB. Okay. So yeah, I think that might actually be... oh, that's what that is. This is really cool. So this is an option if, say, you have a motherboard that doesn't have USB 3.0 on it. You can turn the 3.0 connector into a 2.0 connector. So that's kind of cool. I like that. I like the options. Down underneath in the basement, we've got a place for 3.5-inch hard drives. We won't be using that today because we aren't putting any 3.5-inch hard drives in here. It's got a dust filter here for the power supply, which is going to go down here in this basement. And that's my son, Sebastian. Say hi.
Hi.
Yeah, he's helping his dad build the pewter today. And so, yeah. But that's what the case looks like. And we're going to get started. Mr. Bastion's going to help me, huh? You going to help me? Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, now time for the best part. Oh, yes. Okay, folks. Well, you might be wondering, what is this? Well, let me explain. I got a brand new power supply to go into this system. It was a Rosewill 550 watt Hive, fully modular, 80 plus bronze, beautiful unit. I got a really good deal on it, but it turns out it was a little too good to be true, I guess. When I turned that bad boy on, as you guys might recall from earlier in the video, there's quite a loud fan sound, and I just assumed it was something that would go away once drivers and things were loaded. But it turns out that loud fan sound was coming from the power supply, which indicated to me that there was some kind of sensor issue with the power supply, like it wasn't able to detect its own temperature, and so it was just running full blast, and it was just unreasonably loud. Like I would not be able to, in good conscience, sell that computer over there with that power supply in it. So I packaged it back up. I just put it back in the mail. I'm sending it back, getting a refund. And instead, I'm going to put this little guy in there. This is a 500 watt non-modular power supply done by EVGA. It's an 80 plus white unit. It should be plenty powerful for the system, and it should be plenty reliable. Maybe not as efficient, but as you can hear, I'll get nice and close. It's nice and quiet. and that I think is that's a nice trade-off. So we're going to use this thing. I think it'll go nicely with the build. It's black, whatever. It might have some ketchup and mustard, but yeah, life's full of compromises. You can probably hear a little bit of fan sound right now, but that's actually this little Wraith Spire just going, or not Spire, but Stealth just going in there. So anyways, I was just testing out the system, making sure this power supply was going to do the job, and it looks like it's going to do just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back up into the system. Well, not back up in the system, but into the system, and call it good on that. And so yeah, I'm glad I found a good alternative. So anyway, moving forward. Okay, so we have the PC all up and running, as you can see there. Got Windows all up to date and ready to go, and I have a benchmark here that will play for you guys just so you can see the performance of the GPU, the RX570 that you see inside there, plugged in and ready to go. And so we're going to go ahead and use that benchmark now. And so I like to use this one that's called Superposition. It is done by Unigen, which you can see right here. It's a pretty rigorous benchmark. The default setting for this is 1080p medium, and that's a pretty it's a pretty heavy benchmark, you know, for really any card. And so I'll go ahead and run it at medium so you guys can see what that looks like, and we'll take a look. So I'm gonna go ahead and run it. And of course, this is running in DirectX. Sorry for the dirtiness of my monitor there. It needs to be cleaned. It's a really old monitor. It is a 60 hertz refresh rate, and so yeah, it'll be running at about 60 frames, I'm suspecting. And of course, over here in the top corner, you can see the FPS running there. It also has temperature and utilization showing, and utilization's right around 100%, and the current temperature of the GPU is 62 degrees Celsius, 64 it's climbing as it goes. So far the average FPS is 55 on this benchmark. And sorry for the background noise, I got traffic outside of my house right now. So I'm starting to hear some fan noise there as this thing has come to a higher temperature. It is running the GPU fans at a decent pace right now, and it's not too loud at all, actually. Current average FPS is about 55.5. Okay, so that is going to be our score there, and you guys can see the details on that. And so, you know, the minimum FPS on that run was 44.49 frames per second. The average was 54.53, and the maximum that we saw there was 69.36. And so, yeah, and then you can also see the max and minimum temperature. So the maximum temperature that we saw at that fan curve was 77 degrees Celsius. And of course, if you want it to run cooler, it'll be louder. And so that's kind of the trade-off that you have whenever you're using fans in a machine like this. It will run cooler if you want a more aggressive fan curve, which is really easy to actually change using the Radeon software, which is this program here. And so this is its current fan curve here. And so it really only got up to 75% usage on the fans. And so you can increase that all the way to the max, and you'll get some more system noise as the temperatures increase, but it will run cooler if that's something that you want. So some people don't mind the noise. I like things to run a little bit quieter, and so I don't mind a little more temperature as a trade-off. And 77 is perfectly reasonable, especially on a benchmark like this. This is, like I said, a really fairly rigorous benchmark, especially for something like an RX570. You know, so you're not going to break any records or anything like that with this graphics card, but it will run, you know, AAA games at 1080p pretty easily. That's basically what this benchmark is meant to show you. And so, you know, so medium to ultra settings, depending on what game you're playing at 1080p. You know, the latest titles, something like Tomb Raider or something like, you know, Division or what have you. You know, you'll have to make adjustments on the settings depending on what your expectations are, what your needs are. But if you're running something like Fortnite, or if you're playing something like Call of Duty Warzone, and you're running them at pro settings or you know, whatever you prefer, this is going to do really well at that sort of thing. If your thing is like Overwatch, you know, CS:GO, you know, all those esport titles, this is going to run them really, really well. And there's another look at it again for you guys, just to kind of see it running from this angle here. I just have it on my coffee table right now, so it's got cables and things sticking out of it, but it looks like it's ready to go. Finally, I've been waiting a while to get this one ready to sell, so it's finally good to go. And I think it's going to be a really good 1080p machine for somebody who just wants you know, a kind of a more basic experience, you know, an entry-level, I would say a higher than entry-level experience at 1080p. This is going to be a perfect computer for that. The cost is low, and so, you know, you're actually getting really good value, just considering how much performance that you're going to get out of this. So I think it'll be a good computer for whoever decides to pick this thing up. So I hope this has been helpful. Sorry about all the changing around with parts and things like that. Just to give you guys, you know, a rundown of exactly what's in this machine, so there's no confusion at this point. We have the EVGA 500 watt power supply, 80 plus white. We've got the RX570 4GB version by XFX right there. For the CPU, we're doing the AMD Ryzen 3 1200, and that's a quad core, perfectly suitable for a 1080p machine like this. And for RAM, we just have some sort of basic green RAM sticks there, 16 gigabytes, so it's in dual channel mode to give a little more performance. Really important to have these Ryzen chips in dual channel mode, even if you're not running an APU. It's definitely preferable. And of course, the case is the Montech Fighter with the glass panel, and yeah, so those are the basics. Oh yeah, and the motherboard, of course, is the MSI A320M Pro. So, yep, and it's all working really good. It's nice and quiet and ready to go. So I hope you guys found this useful and helpful, and I thank you again for your interest. And I hope you guys have a good day.